tell us about yourself, what motivated you to run for Gilbert Town Council, and what experience you bring to this role.
I've been a Gilbert resident for 12 years. Again, my name is Joel Coen, obviously. And in that time, I've had small businesses throughout. And the town itself has been in a position where it has helped to really be a central part of our family. My son, who left for college 3 years ago, when he did so, I was in a position where I felt like I wanted to do something for the community, ran for state legislator. Didn't win in that position, but through that reconnected with a lot of leadership within the town, reconnected with a lot of the people in the past that helped to make us a success as a business and us as a family. And so as this approached as an opportunity, I had a lot of folks asking me if this is something that I would like to do. And at the end of the day, this is a legacy play. This is an opportunity to make a difference for the town of Gilbert and be in a position where I'm able to look back and say I gave back what I took, and I think that's why I'm running.
Awesome. So, when it comes to economic development and the business environment, what new or existing initiatives would you support to encourage businesses to start, grow, and stay in Gilbert?
And I think there's several. So in terms of something that's new, I think that I've been working with several business owners in and around the community to talk to them about incentivizing our education programs to have sort of baseline trade school components where they would act as a pipeline to bringing in the schools would act as a pipeline to bringing in electricians, plumbers, other components. And obviously, we have a funding issue when it comes to education. So I've been speaking with the superintendents about how do we build a program that allows us to keep our students here as part of an economic development play, because keeping our students and our residents in the town as opposed to graduating and leaving would make a significant difference. I think the other side that I'm looking at is how do I make the best use case for the land that we have left? So as we look at the northwest area of town and we're looking at redevelopment in that space, as well as the 6 to 7% of land that we have left that's readily available for development, what are we going to do from a best use case to make sure that we're getting the absolute most that we can out of that, not only for the residents of the town, but from an economic development perspective? How do we make sure that it's giving us the best bang for the buck on a daily basis?
As a second part to that, how would you address regulatory hurdles and permitting challenges?
It's interesting you say that. So, I mean, one of the biggest things when it comes to commercial development, particularly, is the time that it takes to run through permitting. And I know that Gilbert has a pretty stout program overarchingly when it comes to that timing. But one thing that I've been talking to multiple people about is how do we potentially incentivize ourselves in the standpoint of would we be able to look at an expedite process that business owners could pay for in order for some of that to happen? Because what happens oftentimes is that if you're in a 90-day phase or something of that nature and you're building a large commercial development and you've got a loan that's out most often on those types of things, there's money that's incurring on a daily basis that can be lots and lots of money. This happens in Phoenix, not as much in Gilbert, but if you look at the opportunity to potentially split those fees and see that there may be an opportunity to gain some additional cash that is good for both parties, I think that's something that could be looked at as a potential opportunity. I think overarchingly, I mean, as long as we're not in a position in which we are stymieing business in terms of what it is that's coming in, I think there needs to be a self-assessment program affiliated to that. But I'm not looking to increase fees or to create scenarios in which we're going to make it harder for people to come in and conduct business in the town of Gilbert. It's got to be a situation where what can we do to consistently look at win-win scenarios that maybe we haven't looked at in the past.
The town council has recently approved significant increases to utility rates. How do you balance infrastructure needs with the financial impact on residents and businesses?
So, in that particular scenario, I think there were several things that occurred that created the problems that did. One is that we hadn't been looking at infrastructure, water rates, and other components in terms of those increases over the past 10 years. And I know I guess I should say we looked at it, but we didn't do anything about it. And so when you start to look at a scenario in which, if we don't do something now, the system could collapse. And I know that there was various types of different things that we could have done, including bond measures and some other components. I mean, it's hard to bite the bullet in that type of a scenario. And what really, in my mind, happened that was poorly executed was the communication surrounding what happened. And I can tell you from my own experience that it was interesting to get a $670 you're 2 months late on your water bill, which was all from the fact that they had switched the billing systems. And I think a lot of folks, just from a communication standpoint, didn't know what was going on. How we communicate what it is that's occurring, why we're doing it. I mean, everybody needs water. There's a situation where we're continuing in a massive drought. And so how do we make sure that we're not making the same mistakes that we've made before? Looking at the long-term ramifications of not investing in infrastructure now to make sure that we don't have to do it later under critical circumstances that will most likely cost us more. So I think it just comes down to planning, it comes down to communication, and it just comes down to making sure that we're addressing problems in the here and now as opposed to when we're in crisis.
Thank you, Joel. As
Yeah.
Gilbert approaches build out, what types of businesses or industries should the town actively prioritize or not prioritize, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, there is a massive opportunity for us to bring in tech jobs into Gilbert. And so I was in Taiwan in October and had an opportunity to speak with members of the WAN, which is essentially like the Taiwanese Congress. And on May 8th, I'm leading an event in Tempe where we're talking to all of these businesses that supplement that $170 billion investment that TSMC is making. And there's more and more billions that are coming in. And so it's not that we have to have people that just solely live on the north side. There's R&D, there's manufacturing that helps to help with the chip manufacturing. There's a lot of other components that go into that. And what's fascinating about it is that many of these people did not know that our town truly exists as an opportunity. And so when you're looking at jobs that pay $150,000 to $250,000 a year, what are we doing to court those types of businesses into the Gilbert area? Not only so that we have residents that will help to supplement from a tax basis in terms of their income, but what do we do to have these tech jobs that don't have tremendous impact on our infrastructure? And I want to be clear. I'm not talking about chip manufacturing. I'm not talking about those types of components. I'm talking about R&D. I'm talking about other elements that from a service perspective help to support those types of industries. And so I think high tech's a big part of that. And then of course, a lot of our tax base comes from retail sales. And so what are we doing to continually support and make sure that we're not oversaturating the retail side of things, but that we're looking at making sure that the mix that we have is right and that we're giving the anyone that may want to come in from a B2C perspective is being able to do so with the opportunity to have as good a business as possible, and just us making sure that we're keeping an eye on how we make sure that we're keeping things competitive, but not overly competitive where businesses fail.
Perhaps building on that, let's talk about redevelopment. What
Mhm.
role do you think redevelopment should play in Gilbert's future, and what outcomes would you hope to see from that effort?
So, I mean, the northwest section of town obviously is in a position where redevelopment's now, I think, a major communication point overarchingly, and something that needs to truly be discussed. And anybody that lives in the town of Gilbert should have the same quality of life as whether you're in the northwest or the southeast or whatever corner it may be. And so, how do we apply and make sure that we're looking at maintaining that quality of life and in all areas of the town, and particularly those that may need that redevelopment? And so as we start to work with developers and as we begin to look at the costs associated to redevelopment, what do we do again to make sure that the essence of what's there and what keeps us the town of Gilbert is going to continue while balancing what has to happen from an economic standpoint to help pay for that redevelopment? I mean, as most people know, it's a lot more expensive to redevelop than it is to develop from flat land. And so there's just a tremendous amount of planning that needs to go into that and understanding to make sure that we don't make mistakes in those particular scenarios, because it's 3 to 4 times the cost if you make a mistake in that type of scenario.
Thank you. Switching to governance. With the transition in town leadership, including the recent uh, departure of the town manager, how will you help ensure stability and effective governance during this period?
Boy, I mean, it's a challenge for anybody, right? And so, I mean, I work in a business consulting group, and a large part of what we do is to make sure that we're keeping the foundation stable, right? And we want to be in a position where what is the mission of what it is that we're looking to accomplish? And then any time that you're in the storm, like the town is right now, you've got to make sure again that the mission critical items are staying where they need to, that people understand what it is that needs to be done, and that there's a strategy applied to what we are going to do to help stabilize what needs to occur today, and then make sure that we thrive in the future. And so, I'm not obviously I'm not going to be one making the final decisions on the town manager that's going to be coming in, but for somebody that is going to be coming into that scenario, I am already in a place where it's like, let's make sure that that person is going to be as dynamic of a CEO type that they can possibly be, because they will be the central focus of what happens from the town employee perspective. And then just the last part of that is just keeping the lines of communication open in a space where it's a matter of we are all working together towards serving the people of this town. There's not going to be drama. There's not going to be situations in which we are opposing each other in a way that isn't constructive. Obviously, I'm not going to always have the same ideas as those that I'm working with, but at the same time, we're here to solve problems, and I want to make sure that we're doing that in a dynamic way, where at the end of the day, we walk out and we know what we're doing is the best of what we have available for our constituents.
Well, I appreciate that, man. And, kind of piggyback off that, um, Gilbert has a large and growing municipal budget. How will you approach budgeting and prioritization to ensure responsible spending while supporting essential services and economic growth?
Yeah, I mean, so at the largest P&L that I've ever helped to manage was about 1.2 billion, and the towns is obviously larger than that. And I think that at any time when you have a budget like this, and especially when you're looking at scenarios where you're looking at multi-year deficits, I personally, in those scenarios, will look out and start to tier what are the systems that are critical. So, tier one systems being infrastructure, public safety, those types of components, tier two, tier three, tier four. And it just kind of moves down to nice to haves, right? When you get down to tier four, it's like, what are we spending money on today that is not going to be critical to the town functioning on a day to day basis? And how do we look at those types of things in a way that makes sense? And I think what you can't do is sometimes what I've seen happen from a governance perspective is that you just kind of keep spending the money, or you borrow money to keep things moving in that direction. I don't want to do that. It's the same thing that happens when you're in your personal budget, and maybe you're not going to be door dashing 6 times anymore a month. You'll be down to three. It might hurt a little bit to have to cook your own meals, but at the end of the day, it's better than having to put it on a credit card to have the food just show up for you, right? So I'm not one that wants to get in debt. I'm not one that wants to get into a scenario in which I owe people things. Let's see what we've got. How do we make sure that we can add money to the top line, and get things through in a way where we don't have to borrow money to have to try to pay for things that may not be essential.
Agreed. What responsibility do elected officials have in setting the tone for respectful discourse? And how would you model that in your interaction?
Well, I mean, I've said this many times. I mean, I love being in scenarios where there is discourse, and it doesn't mean that you have to be offended. I mean, if you take Abraham Lincoln and John Adams and some of the greatest leaders that we've ever had in our country, civil discourse was at the very core of what allowed us to become what we are. And Abraham Lincoln surrounded himself with people that didn't agree with him. It's critical to understand all phases of what it is, because my experience and the things that I've been through in my life might not be the same as yours. And so, us working through ultimately, is there a better way to approach this than maybe I am at this very moment? And getting into a space in which we're removing the emotion out of the conversation and just looking at it from a pragmatic solution standpoint, I think is what gets us there. And anytime things start to get really emotional, it's pulling that down, having that conversation in a way where we're resetting to understand what is the mission of what we're trying to achieve. And when you're in governance, and I mean, obviously politics is extremely charged. At the end of the day, you're doing a job where you're trying to serve the people, and the people that you represent is the attitude that you have to have when you're working through problems.
Amen. Well, once again, thank you. What does a strong, effective partnership with the chamber look like in practice? And how would you engage with the business community if elected.
Well, and to be clear, if I had not, when I moved to Arizona, if I had not connected with the chamber the way that we did, and Kathy Tilkey had met with me, and sort of John Lewis kind of initially took me underneath his wing and got us introduced to people, and the chamber was central to our success. And I think from my perspective, one of the things that as I look to where we can see continued success is things like continuing education or profit and loss management, making sure that the small business owners that are living within Gilbert continue to have those resources that are available through the chamber. I know that we have a very passionate community through our chamber, and I have been one that's been able to thrive as a result of it. I think that the town, and from a position from a standpoint of governance on that side, is how do we tie together again to make sure that we're utilizing the resources of the chamber, the resources of the town, and working together to make sure that we have as good a business environment for our business owners that are here in Gilbert.